You know why? Because he's a total wannabe Donald Trump. This all goes back to the 2020 election that somehow Trump mysteriously, they put their tinfoil hats on, and all of a sudden Trump really won the 2020 election. But you know what runs down our democracy, and we shouldn't allow this to happen. But he said so much of the reason he's running for governor, his quote, is because of Donald Trump. He's been endorsed by Donald Trump 4 times. He said he's honored and pleased to have Donald Trump's endorsement. So, you know, he plays this game that he goes to his extreme people that he does on right-wing radio and talks about these issues and then tries to come here in Northern Virginia and pretend, oh, I'm some moderate. He's not. He's extreme on abortion, election integrity, and all these other issues. He is bought and paid for by Donald Trump. He wants to bring Donald Trump-style politics to Virginia, and we're not going to allow it.
Mr. Younkin, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Terry, you just made folks in Las Vegas a lot of money, and I know you love to go campaign there versus being here. But there's an over.
First, I do love Las Vegas.
There's an over and under tonight. There's an over and under tonight on how many times you're going to say Donald Trump, and it was 10, and you just busted through it. You're running.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That is a clip from last night's Virginia gubernatorial debate where Glenn Younkin crushed Terry McAuliffe, not only on McAuliffe's descent into chanting Trump, but especially on schools and public education. Glenn Younkin, the next governor of Virginia, joins me now. Good morning, Glenn. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hugh. Good morning to you. Thanks for having me back.
Congratulations. I believe that your opponent, Terry McAuliffe, last night uttered the dumbest line I've ever heard in the history of debates, and I want to play it for the audience. It's at the end of cut 29. This takes a minute, and then we'll talk about it. Glenn Younkin and Terry McAuliffe last night, cut 29.
What we've seen over the course of the last 20 months is our school systems refusing to engage with parents. In fact, in Fairfax County this past week, we watched parents so upset because there was such sexually explicit material in the library they had never seen. It was shocking. And in fact, you vetoed the bill that would have informed parents that they were there. You believe school systems should tell children what to do. I believe parents should be in charge of their kids' education.
Mr. McAuliffe, 30 seconds.
So first of all, this shows how clueless Glenn Younkin is. He doesn't understand what the laws were because he's never been involved here in helping Virginia. But it was not. The parents had the right to veto bills, veto books, Glenn, not to be knowledgeable about it, also take them off the shelves. And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Glenn Younkin, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. I'm gobsmacked by that. Could you believe he said that?
I couldn't believe he said it, but it is absolutely at the heart of Terry McAuliffe's belief system. He believes that government and unions and school boards should be in charge of your children's lives. This is what he thinks, and parents shouldn't be engaged. This is why voters in Virginia are rejecting Terry McAuliffe, because they all recognize that he is a big government. I know better than you. I don't respect anything you believe, from mandating everything to shutting schools to shutting businesses to teaching your children things that you know aren't right, but they're in Terry McAuliffe's mind, it's what they must know in order to be part of the Terry McAuliffe clan. This is just the worst thing I've ever heard from anybody who's respecting family, respecting parents, and respecting our children. That's why we're going to go win this. I'm going to stand up for teachers, for students. I'm going to stand up for parents and make sure that parents are engaged in their children's education.
Yeah, this is Northern Virginia. I voted for you yesterday. I happened to run into Mrs. Younkin when I was early voting. It was nice to see her out working the polls early on the day of debate day. But there is a huge school race as well going on. There's school board races all over the state because people have had it with the left-wing education machine in Virginia. So when Terry steps on a rake, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. Do we have the short version of that, by the way? I don't want to put words in Terry's mouth. I wanted to get it exactly right. Do we have the short version yet? Okay, we'll work on that. So this is Northern Virginia. This has been rocketing Northern Virginia, where he must win a big margin because you are going to win the rest of the state very, very handily, Glenn Younkin. Did he not know that education is issue number one in Northern Virginia?
I think Terry is so out of touch. He's made the calculus that he loses to Glenn Younkin, and therefore he just talks about Trump all the time from the earlier clip. He knows that he loses to Glenn Younkin on all the issues because he has got a failed set of policies. His policies, as he always talks about, my 100 pages of policies, are the same ones he had in 2009, the same ones he had in 2013. It's going to cost Virginians $16 billion, a $5,400 tax increase for every Virginia family. And Virginia voters are rejecting him. And here we are in Northern Virginia, which has been absolutely ground zero on parental involvement in education, over critical race theory, over books and libraries that are sexually explicit and shouldn't be in there. And Terry McAuliffe has the audacity to say that parents should not be involved in their kids' education. I mean, this is who he is, and this is why voters are going to reject him and elect me the next governor.
I want to play another clip. It's another McAuliffe Whopper, and you call him on it, cut 24 from last night's debate between my guest, Glenn Younkin, Virginia's next governor, and the washed-up Terry McAuliffe, cut 24.
Businesses are not going to come to a state where they're putting walls up around their state. He's against gay marriage. He's against abortion, and that's his religious right. And I respect his right for his opinion. But I can tell you this, he cannot. The businesses that I brought to Virginia, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, they are not coming to a state that discriminates against women.
Thank you.
They're not.
Mr. McAuliffe, 30 seconds, Mr. Younkin.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Terry, I just can't understand how you can just so comfortably lie to everybody. And let's just be clear.
That's what you've been doing all night,
You
buddy.
stood up in front of a group of people and said that you would bring companies here because it was easier to get an abortion. You want to be the abortion governor. Let's be clear. Companies are not making these choices. Ford Motor Company decided to put 4 plants, $7 billion, 2 in Kentucky, 1 in Tennessee, and 1 in Georgia. They skipped Virginia. This is the legacy you've left Virginia. A dying economy, jobs that aren't for anyone, and you absolutely misunderstand what it takes to get companies to come so that Virginians can have the kind of future they deserve.
Very quick.
That was a killer, Glenn Younkin. And I know Terry McAuliffe's been a grifter for a long time, and happy Terry, glad-handing Terry. But do you think voters get how bad it is for the state right now? I think they do, but you're banking on it.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to continue to do is tell the truth, and Terry doesn't. He lies about his record, and he doesn't recognize the fact that we, for the last 8 years, have been watching the states around us absolutely lap Virginia. They've grown 70% faster economically and created so many more jobs. I mean, over the last 8 years, North Carolina's created 8 times the job that Virginia has, and Tennessee 6 times the job. And we just saw it in spades yesterday when Ford Motor Company announces 4 new plants, and they put 2 in Kentucky, 1 in Tennessee, and 1 in Georgia. And they didn't even consider putting 1 in Virginia because they know that Terry McAuliffe's going to, if he were elected governor, going to get rid of right to work, force unionization on every Virginian. He's created a high-tax, high-regulation environment, and companies aren't coming. So I'm going to fix that. We're going to cut regulations. We're going to get our taxes down. We're going to get the cost of living down. We're going to make it easier to do business, and we're going to get companies to come here as opposed to skip over us and go every place else and put Virginians in a position where they have to leave in order to go get these jobs. Virginia's going to be the best place to live, work, and raise a family when I'm governor.
You said we're going to welcome the Afghan refugees, and I'll play this later, that we need to teach our kids real history, but I want the audience to hear one more time before we lose you, Glenn Young. This is Terry McAuliffe stepping on the rake, the short version, what he said. I think the line that will go down in debate history. Can you play the short version for me? I think it's the last cut.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I want to put that on an endless loop, Glenn Younkin, because if I've seen one issue roil the Commonwealth in the last year, it's parents telling school boards to listen to them, and you just heard Terry McAuliffe tell school boards to disregard parents.
He told what's in his heart, that he believes government and unions should be in charge of your children. That's what Terry McAuliffe believes, and that's why voters are going to reject him. We're bringing voters together. We're bringing Republicans and independents and Democrats. There's a reason why I'm winning the independents running away. There's a reason why so many Democrats are supporting me. It's because they're tired of this 40-year-old rhetoric that comes from Terry McAuliffe, who is literally the godfather of the modern-day Republican Party that wants to tell everybody in America what to do. This is what he believes. This is why Virginians, on behalf of America, are going to reject him and chart a new path forward for not just the Commonwealth, but for our country.
Congratulations on a big win last night, Glenn Younkin. I think the momentum is clearly with you. Keep coming back in the closing 3 weeks. And Virginians, you can go vote early. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did for Glenn Younkin yesterday. Come right back, though. The Hugh Hewitt Show is live inside the Beltway. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom. Streaming on Salem Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate, the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather. Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it, the left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens are captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive. Back in November, she processed a murder-suicide case. The very next day, that murder-suicide case showed up on the state website as a COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. Play that again for me, please.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
One more time.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Glenn Younkin is going to win Virginia by double digits because Terry McAuliffe just told every parent in Virginia that they should not be involved in their children's education. They should leave the teachers' unions alone. Terry McAuliffe is I'm holding in my hand, I have a new sponsor, Moinked. If you see this, I got my Moink box yesterday, Moinked. Moink's the best meat in America, and this catalog that comes with it is terrific. But here are the cuts of beef and pork that you can order or that you can get in your Moink box. Yeah, it's moinkbox.com, Moinked box.com. Oh, it's Moink Box. Omink box.com, moinkbox.com. So my Moink Box came, and it's got the sirloin, the bone-in, the tenderloin, the filet, the flank, the breakfast steak, the New York strip steak, the chuck arm roast, the ground beef. Then it's got pages of pork, chicken, lamb, and salmon. So it's page after page of cuts. Well, in moinkbox.com, they could gather up Terry McAuliffe after last night's debate because he was in pieces after last night's debate. I don't know who he ran against. Maybe he ran against my old friend 8 years ago. But Terry McAuliffe had the machine with him and Barack Obama campaigning with him. Not this time. Slow Joe can't go with him anywhere. And Slow Joe is the disaster of Afghanistan and a collapse in the House of the spending bills. That's coming to a showdown. We got a lot to cover today. But the key thing is Terry McAuliffe into the ditch last night. I couldn't believe it. I missed the debate live. So I come out of a great dinner with the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and friends at about 10 o'clock, and I start to scroll through, and I see over and over again this clip. Play it again, please.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
And I thought someone had written it down the wrong way. Twitter had made it up. Terry McAuliffe, he's an old guy. He's been around forever. He's boring. He likes, by the way, talk radio. He loves me. Terry, I like Terry. Everybody likes Terry. He's a grifter. When he was on this radio show a couple of years back. What did he say about me? You got my button handy? The button that Terry McAuliffe is always...
I'm Terry McAuliffe, and you should listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show every single day, the greatest radio show in the United States of America.
So there you have it. Terry McAuliffe endorsing me, and I endorse Glenn Younkin. I voted for Glenn yesterday. And the point of attacking parents over... It's one of those moments he's around Joe Biden too much. If you let Terry talk long enough, he will put his foot in his mouth. And I don't believe this is close. I believe that Virginians are going to overwhelmingly vote for serious, competent... By the way, Glenn Younkin is funny and good-humored, good-looking, in control, 4 wonderful boys, wonderful wife, has led a great life, has brought lots of jobs to Virginia, has brought lots of jobs to the United States from the Carlyle Group. He's a businessman. And he grew up poor. And he lived in Richmond, Virginia Beach, and now in Northern Virginia. So he's lived in the 3 principal population areas of the Commonwealth. Do you think Terry McAuliffe, the carpetbagger, really is going to beat him when he tells parents that they have nothing to do with their schools, go away? Especially after a year of shutdowns. If you hated your shutdown, by the way, Alliance Defending Freedom defends Christian schools that refuse to shut down. Christian schools that needed help last year got help from Alliance Defending Freedom. And if you go over to HughHewitt.com and you just load it up. Up at the top, there will be a box that says Alliance Defending Freedom. Please support freedom. That is our annual fundraising drive to get you to support Alliance Defending Freedom. Please be generous. Please give 50, 100, 500, 1,000. They have 75 full-time lawyers. They defend the First Amendment free exercise of religion clause, whether you're a Catholic or an evangelical or a Latter-day Saint, whether you are a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or no religion whatsoever. They're mostly evangelicals and Catholics. But they have 3,300 affiliated lawyers, a staff of 75. They win, they win, they win, they win. They protect religious schools. They protect religious liberty. They protect you. And they have all their clients for free. So please count it as part of your tithe or an extra offering. Head over to HughHewitt.com, click on the Alliance Defending Freedom banner. Come right back for more on the day after Glenn Younkin effectively cinches the Virginia governor's race here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she? This is what she's upset about.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way. And I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, and we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
This is like right out of a comic book or a movie or a novel about an inept, comical, egregiously corrupt administration. You're going to investigate the Border Patrol agent on the horse? What are you still looking for the root cause of the problem, Kamala? Are you still looking for that? She's a little bit like O.J. Simpson looking for Nicole's killer on the golf courses of Las Vegas. He's still on that search, for the real killer of Nicole and Ron Goldman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah, for a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is to secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So
and
he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this, and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of Green are looking at him as their boss saying, wait a minute, we're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
That there is a way that this could all be solved. That actually Republican states have the ability to solve this if they wanted to. Put Mayorkas aside, put the Biden bashing aside. I'm kind of tired of that, aren't you? I'm fatigued with governors going on cable television and saying, Biden regime is terrible and we need... Okay, enough of that, okay? Do something about it. And in fact, Texas showed that you can do something about it. If it gets so bad, it seemed as if local government stepped up and they secured the border. They created almost a perimeter around the Haitian criminal camp of border jumpers that have tried to come into our country. Now, some people in the media are saying, well, these are refugees. No, they are not. A refugee is someone who comes from a war-torn country that is facing imminent death, or their neighborhood or their home has been bombed and obliterated to smithereens. We are, in our hemisphere, there's no such country that qualifies as a refugee country in the traditional definition. Who's paying for this?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was Terry McAuliffe last night at the Virginia gubernatorial debate saying that parents should not tell schools what to do with their kids. I really can't understand it. It is tangentially related to my next guest, Dr. Francis Collins, who's the director of the National Institute for Health, and I'll come back to that. Good morning, Dr. Collins. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Well, good morning to you, Hugh. Always glad to have a chance to chat. I'm sure you've got questions, and I hope I'll have answers.
I do. I want to begin so that the audience is grounded. The bureaucratic blob out there is actually not hard to understand if you've got a map. There's the Health and Human Services Department run by Secretary Becerra. Underneath it are the NIH, which is run by you, the CDC, which is run by Dr. Walensky, and then Dr. Fauci is at a different institute who doesn't answer directly to the secretary but answers directly to the president. Do I have that right?
Dr. Fauci has sort of two jobs. He is directly responsive to the president as the COVID advisor, but he also runs one of the institutes at NIH, so he reports to me.
Okay, so here's my first question. Of the advisory panels that we've heard from, and it goes to the advisory panel and boosters. I got my booster, by the way, on Friday. Have you had your booster yet, Doctor?
Now, I got Moderna, so I'm waiting until we get the data on that to get mine. I'll be lining up, and we're happy to get that jab once we have the data to show that Moderna also works, and I think that's probably going to be the case. We're just not quite there yet.
Okay, so the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I wander into the CVS on the West Coast because we're both Pfizer people. We got punched again, the third dose on Friday. No ill effects. It's wonderful. It works. I want to be as healthy as possible. And I'm a big booster proponent. I'm out there. But I did not like the advisory committee. And I think there were two of them. It gets confusing. I believe there was an advisory committee to the FDA. Right. And I believe there was an advisory committee to the CDC, and one or both of them said only 65 and older. Which one did that, or did both of them do that?
Actually, the FDA committee said 65 and older, and also younger people with medical conditions, and also people at high risk for exposure because of their jobs, like healthcare providers. The CDC Advisory Committee got hung up on that last one about whether people with high risk of exposure, let's say teachers, let's say healthcare providers, let's say grocery workers, ought to be also offered a booster. And ultimately they voted against it, but it was a close call, 9-6. And then Dr. Walensky, looking at all the data again, basically decided that she would take their advice about everything else. But in that one, she would say, no, I think we really should offer that to healthcare providers. And I agree with her. I think she made the right decision.
Now, Doctor, the last time you were on with me, you were very patient as I use you as my piñata on government messaging. The booster is a good thing. People should get the booster. That message is easy. And pharmacists can deliver it, and you don't need a doctor's note. Somehow these panels screwed up that messaging so that I read article after article in the nation's many, many different online platforms that have gotten the advice wrong. The messaging got screwed up again. Did you notice that the messaging got screwed up because of the complexity of the advisory council, Dr. Walensky, the White House being mad at the CDC? It was all out there. Meanwhile, the clear, crisp message, get a booster from Pfizer. You can't do it from Moderna yet, but get it as soon as possible, was lost. Did you notice that?
Well, it was a little hard to sift through all the noise, but you got to figure out, in our country, do we want to have this very public debate where everybody doesn't always agree? Or do we want to do all that behind a closed door and then announce the result? We did the former. I think it was a great lesson in how you make public health decisions, but it wasn't like this crisp, easy, okay, here's what you're going to do. If you want that message, well, go to China. They'll give you that version. We're into this idea of showing the world how we make those decisions. And yeah, sometimes it's not so straightforward. It's complicated and people don't always agree. But, get over it. Isn't this really the best way that we can convince people that we're making decisions that's good for them and not just some arbitrary, okay, that's what I think kind of outcome?
No, I disagree, because we know the science goes on and we would like clear direction. And as a result, and this is tricky, this will get you into trouble, we have a lot of NBA players who may be the most culturally significant force involved in the vaccine debate. A lot of NBA superstars won't get vaccinated. Some NFL players won't.
LeBron James says he got the jab.
LeBron James is the first. He did it yesterday, but there are people like Kyrie Irving, with whom he won the championship in Cleveland after the Golden State Warriors were down 3-1 in the greatest sports comeback in history. I know my James. I know my Kyrie Irving. Have you guys reached out to the NBA to beg their players to get vaccinated? They are the biggest impediment, I believe, in the African-American community to the African-American community getting vaccinated.
I have not personally done so, and I don't know what's been going on behind the scenes. I am baffled by why this would be something that somebody with such visibility would want to resist when you can see people around you getting sick and dying. Again, we still have 2,000 people every day dying, most of them unvaccinated. Gosh, come on, basketball players. If you got a chance to do something here to save lives, shouldn't you do that? What is this about anyway?
Yeah, well, I don't think they should be allowed to play with vaccinated players. I really think they should just be sat until they're done, because the risk that they present to otherwise healthy people is too immense. Now, Dr. Collins, I want to go back to the Advisory Council. Did you participate in them? Did you read them? Do you know what they debated about?
Oh, yeah, I listened because it was all publicly streamed for anybody who wanted to hear the debate. There was an all-day meeting of the FDA group on that Friday, and then there were 2 days of the CDC group. I had a few other things to do, but I had it on my screen, kind of watching and listening to the things and seeing the data that they were presented to try to make their decisions. Yeah, I watched it. It was an interesting process.
How much of any of those 3 participations brought up equity issues about the third world getting the vaccine before boosters roll out in the United States? That debate is roiling Great Britain right now. Was it part of the Advisory Council?
It was certainly in there. People did bring it up and worried a bit about whether we were sending the wrong message, if we seem to be like already grabbing for a third dose when others haven't gotten their first. But the argument, I think, is pretty compelling that we can do both. We don't have to do either or. The production levels are going up rapidly. And the number of doses we're talking about for boosters in the U.S. for the rest of this year might be 100 million. Meanwhile, we are promising to give something close to 1 billion doses to the rest of the world because the U.S. has led in that effort. So let's do both, and.
Now, you and I share a worldview, Dr. Collins. We're both Christians. But I have a view of the government, which is constitutionalist and conservative, and an originalist. There is no job description for the FDA, the CDC, or any advisory committee to do public policy on a question of the efficacy of the booster. To me, they polluted that conversation when they injected equity issues. In other words, should our foreign policy trump our domestic policy? That is not the FDA. That is not the CDC. That is not the NIH. That is the president's call. Did anyone say, this is not our job? We're not elected. Nobody knows who we are. We're not responsible to anyone. We ought not to be injecting our own personal political views about equity into what is a scientific issue about whether the boosters work.
I don't recall anybody making the speech that you just made. I will tell you this was not a big component of their deliberations, but you know, who is supposed to make these decisions if it's not a public group of experts that are convened together to advise the government? Again, the government can decide whether or not to take their advice. Dr. Walensky didn't entirely take the advice of her group. But if you are having this done in a fashion where people are really going to benefit from expertise, this seems like the right way to go. And I don't know how you could ask a group of that sort to gather without having some sense that ethics ought to be in the room. And if there's an ethical decision that relates to a global sort of moral responsibility, I wouldn't want to tell them, sorry, you can't go there. That's not your job. They may reflect on it if they want to. It was not a big part of what those conversations led to.
Well, I think it infects it. And my answer back to that, doctor, would be, would you want me to perform any kind of surgery on you? I'm a pretty good lawyer, Michigan trained, order of the coif, judge, clerked on the D.C. Circuit, 30 years of partner in big law. Would you want me to do any kind of operation on you?
Well, no, but hang on. I don't like your analogy. Come on.
It's a perfect analogy. The administrative state is the administrative state is growing out of control. And in Great Britain, these doctors are taking control of policy from duly elected parliamentarians and a prime minister. And I don't want bureaucrats, and I especially don't want advisory committees convened to talk about the science, talking about public policy. I mean, I really got to get this through to you. The government should not be doing this. They shouldn't be asking private citizens policy questions. Those people aren't elected to anything.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I think in this instance, we're talking about something that's not just a policy issue. It's also an issue about global moral responsibility. I don't think you can ask people to check their morality at the door when they come to make a scientific judgment. That's all tied up there. And that's not the same as being whether you're an expert in surgery or not. We all bring some kind of a moral compass with us. And I think that's a good thing for the most part, as long as it's not overblown and it doesn't sort of step into the way of making a rational scientific decision. I think in this instance, there was not really an issue here to get that concerned about in terms of people getting carried away with their global concerns.
Well, global concerns are fine if you're Joe Biden, but I liked it when Ronald Reagan was being operated on at GW. He looked up and he said, I hope you're all, none of you are Democrats. And they all said, we're all Republicans today. Sometimes politics doesn't enter into it, but in an advisory committee, I just wish you'd take it back to them. I don't care what they think about international ethics. I really don't. I want to know if the booster works, because I think the booster should be available to anyone who wants the booster yesterday.
Well, I get you, Hugh, and I think I can reassure you, having listened to hours of this debate, that is by far the majority of what they did. I don't think you need to be too worried that this somehow ran off the rails.
Well, they didn't give it to anyone under 65, and I know Joe Biden wanted to, and Ron Klain wanted to give it to everybody. So they've screwed up the messaging. They stopped it arbitrarily. Luckily, in the time since I had to wait for the vaccine when I was 64, I'm on the right side of 65. I think a 64-year-old who wants the vaccine should be pretty ticked off at the government because it's arbitrary. It's an arbitrary deadline cooked up, I believe, because of equity issues. But, Doctor, I want to get to a different issue.
So let me just push back a minute. I think if
Please
they
do.
had reservations about not giving it to everybody, it really didn't have much at all to do with equity across the planet. It was really benefits risks. It's clear from the Israeli data, which is by far the best data we've got, that the main risks in not getting the booster are falling on people over 65. So that was a reason to prioritize them. And it was a reason to prioritize people with medical conditions because, if they get sick, they're more likely to get really severely sick. For a person who's like 25 and is not in a profession where they have a lot of high risks of exposures, yeah, the benefit risk of the booster is still somewhat debatable. So I think they weren't ready quite to go there. I think we'll go there after we get more data on younger people, but it just wasn't quite there. But I don't think their reluctance to say, okay, boosters for everybody had much to do with concerns about equity across the globe.
Okay, last quick question, Dr. Collins. Please keep coming back. You told me an ivermectin study was underway.
Yes.
Is it done? Have you finished the ivermectin study?
We are running it right now on people who just got diagnosed. They get offered ivermectin for 3 or maybe 5 days. There are 2 different arms here at a dose that ought to be the right one if it's going to have benefit. We have not unblinded the data. It's randomized. It's placebo controlled. It'll be another month probably before we have sufficient numbers of people enrolled to be able to unblind the data and see what happens. But we are going to get an answer, and I'll be really glad so I don't have to keep wondering whether this is really as good as anecdotes say, because some of the data that I've seen in other studies is very conflicting. So let's get the study done right and get the answer.
Please come back when it's out, Doctor. I appreciate your time this morning. Dr. Francis Collin, Director of the National Institute for Health. Always a pleasure. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are 2 things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policemen, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah. That's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event,
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas.
Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm going to play Terry McAuliffe stepping on the rake last night. I don't think parents should be telling teachers what to teach. Unbelievable. Before I go to my guest, I want to remind you that I was talking with Dr. Collins last segment, and I did not take my relief factor, which I take every morning at this hour. And so I've got my relief factor out right now because after this show, I will be out and do 6 miles because I'm talking to Dr. Collins, Dr. Fauci. I'm talking to Mollie Hemingway today and Keith Krach and a lot of people. And I'm going to be spun up. And afterwards, I got to get out and exercise, and I got to read Dante as I go walking. But here's my relief factor. I take it on air every day with my lukewarm coffee because I do want to stay active and moving until I'm very old. And relief factor is for adults, it's for active seniors, it's for young athletes, it's for anyone who wants to get rid of the minor aches and pains in their life. Take a once-a-day vitamin, take relief factor, leave the over-the-counters behind, get rid of the aches and pains that accompany exercise and aging. Get your relief factor pack for $19.95. I'm joined by Brian Williams. Not that Brian Williams with whom I have worked often at NBC. This Brian Williams, you see his picture. He's Dean of the Templeton Honors College at Eastern University. You know, Dean, Jack Templeton was a good friend of mine, and Pina Templeton was a good friend of mine. So when I saw that you were going to come and represent Dante today, 100 Days of Dante, I was very happy. Did you happen to have the pleasure of knowing Jack and Pina when they were alive?
I think that speaks pretty well of you, Hugh. Say you're friends with Jack and Pina. Unfortunately, I did not know Jack while he was still alive, but certainly Pina. When I came here in 2017, certainly had many, many wonderful opportunities to get to know Pina and spend time with her, and certainly have gotten to know the next couple generations of that family who are dear friends of ours and really delightful human beings. So I'm glad that you got to know them over the years.
Amazing, man. Dr. Jack and I got to drive from Detroit Airport to Hillsdale College one day and back and forth, and he did a speech there. And we just had a wonderful time. And we talked about English literature most of the time. And we did not talk about Dante. I'm not going to make that up to shine you on. But he was a literature lover. How did you get wrapped up in the 100 Days of Dante program? And people can go to 100daysofdante.com. Or they can follow on Twitter, the number 100 Days of Dante. How did you get involved in that?
Yeah, well, Dante has been a love of my life for decades, and I spent many years teaching high school in Kansas, and Dante was one of the main things that I taught. And then when I was over at the University of Oxford, I ended up being kind of a go-to Dante guy for several years, doing multiple lectures and teaching on him. And then when my friend Matt Anderson down at Baylor texted me one day and said, "Hey, what do you think about this idea?" Usually when Matt has an idea, I just go with it because it's usually pretty good. And then he said, "I want to do this great Dante reading group." And I jumped on immediately because for me and for my students, my high school students, 20 years ago, Dante and the comedy have just been so formative for me, and it was so formative for generations of them that when Matt said, "Hey, I want to create the world's largest Dante reading group," I said, "I'm all in. What do you need?"
Well, now, would you give the quick précis on how people get involved? It's not too late. It's been going for a couple of weeks. People can catch up or they can jump on the train right now. What do they do each week?
Great. Yep. So if you go to 100daysofdante.com, you can sign up with your email. And then what you're going to get on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of every week, we started in September, and it's going to go till Easter 2022. You will get an email in your inbox on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with a 9 to 10 minute reflection from some scholar on that particular chapter. Dante calls them cantos or little songs that we're reading for that day. And so we're only, I think, up to Canto, or it's a short chapter, really, 9 or 10 today. So you're certainly still able to jump in and pick up with the rest of us. So here's the deal. We've decided, we want to try to make it reasonable for people to read this great Christian epic and go through this grand journey together with us. And so we are reading 3 basically short chapters a week. So it's very manageable. They take about 10 to 12 minutes to read, and then there's a 9 to 10-minute reflection on that particular canto or chapter.
It is a great Bible study group exercise. It's a great small group exercise. It's a great homeschooling exercise. And everybody ought to know something about Dante. And I'm one of the first original sinners. Luckily, I had David Allen White teach me a little bit about Dante, who taught English at the United States Naval Academy forever. And now they can get people like Professor Williams. They can get Professor Anderson. We got a minute left, Brian Williams. If anyone starts 100daysofdante.com, will they be sorry? Will they consider it wasted time? I think it's worth everybody's effort, and it's important for parents to tell their kids about it, contrary to what Terry McAuliffe said. What do you say to the audience about throwing in with 100daysofdante.com?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Listen, my 78-year-old mom, my 51-year-old wife, and my 18-year-old daughter are all reading it for the very first time. Because they've heard me talk about it for years and years now, and they recognize this is a fantastic opportunity to be walked through this great Christian epic that has been formative in the lives of Christians and poets and literary people for really hundreds of years. And so, no, this is the opportunity to walk your way through this great epic.
Dr. Williams, thank you. 100daysofdante.com from Eastern College. Brian Williams, this week's promoter of what I want people to do, which is love the good and the beautiful and the Christian. And 100 Days of Dante, the number 100, daysofdante.com. Dante is spelled D-A-N-T-E for the Steelers fans. Come right back to Hour 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I saw the pictures. They were just grabbing them with their hands, and the reins are used to turn the horses. I was like, what? But this is what the left does. They fool people. Like if you're, okay, so I'm like, okay. If I'm on that border is being overwhelmed. I'm going a little crazy, okay? I'm going a little crazy. So maybe they got a little crazy, but maybe, you know what I mean? If we were in that situation, but no, come to find out, it was just another left-wing attack, another left-wing fiasco made to look like you heard Ilhan Omar saying that our country is systemically racist. Meanwhile, her black behind is on TV. Her black behind is in Congress shaping our nation into an anti-Semitic country, but we're systemically racist. Meanwhile, this bigot is in Congress shaping our nation and turning our nation into a bunch of racists. I kid you not. I feel like every day I come into this studio, I feel like I'm checking the corner. Where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I feel like I'm being punked by the Democrats every day. Out there. Let's go to Joel in San Diego, California.
Yeah, man, 1996, everyone forgets 900 FBI files were found in the Clinton White House.
Good point.
And they've been in the pocket of the FBI for years.
Joel,
so this thing goes deep. We need a new untouchables to be reincarnated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I feel dumb asking this question. Is there any way to vet 120,000 Afghan quote-unquote refugees if they don't have any ID papers, Tom?
No. And let me tell you something. Let's just look at the facts. It takes, especially an immigrant visa, takes 18 to 24 months to vet.
Yeah.
Right? Because CIS gets it, they send it to the chief of mission at the embassy. He has it for, at least 12, 13 months, and they go through all the Afghan records, right? Is a birth certificate legitimate? Is a passport legitimate? They got to go through all these certain documents and check numerous databases, including DOD databases. Is there any derogatory information on this person? Before this happened in Afghanistan, the regular process took 18 and 24 months. And here's the fact. 84% of SI visa requests were denied.
Wow.
And that's when they had time to actually vet them. So now they're trying to vet within days or weeks when they got no access. There is no chief of mission. There is no embassy over there. I don't know where the operator is. Do they have access to Afghan records anymore? Does the Taliban have it? How do they know what's a legitimate passport? Where do all the records for the Afghan government go? So we got no staff over there, no insight over there. We don't have access to Afghan paperwork. And I talked to people here at Dulles, law enforcement, that said some of these people show up as absolutely zero ID. How the hell can you possibly vet them? If you got an 84% denial rate when they have time, that tells you how full of fraud this whole system is.
So the idea that we are still safe, that this isn't being exploited by terrorists, that's just garbage, right, Tom?
We are scary unsafe.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
These powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
The front page of the New York Times, the alleged paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what the New York Times is covering today. The paper of record. They're also covering Biden's speech at the United Nations, which we will cover a little bit. There's not that much there to cover, as he read from a teleprompter. Instead, we're going to cover the imminent invasion happening in our country. We already have had 1.8 million people illegally cross into our country this year. 1.8 million. Cutting in line, border jumping, breaking the law. These are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals. This is designed disorder by the Biden regime. And only thanks to Fox News stumbling across this and publicizing it do we even know this is happening. And in some of the coverage on Tucker Carlson's wonderful show, there was something that was said by Bill Magulin that I think was quite revealing. Something that I think exposed how this could actually be solved. That many people are upset that the southern border is wide open, but we feel powerless. We feel helpless. In fact, we are told that unless the Biden regime steps up and does something, there's nothing we can do.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
It's most amazing discoveries, thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, California. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, welcoming a new friend from last year. Keith Krach was brought to Washington, D.C. by Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo to take over technology, and now he's brought his immense tech ability to the campus of Perdue University to begin the Center for Diplomacy and Technology. Good morning, Keith. Good to have you back, Mr. Secretary.
Well, it's great to be back, Hugh. It's always good to see my Cleveland man, that's for sure.
Well, you know, when they told me you had started this at Perdue, I was unaware that there was a degree-granting institution at West Lafayette, because in the Big Ten, we only count football schools. But actually, you and Mitch Daniels have done a great thing. I'm not going to give you my usual Perdue grief. Would you tell people what you and Mitch Daniels and the Perdue community have done? Because this is important for the next 100 years for America.
It really is. So the Perdue Center for Technology Diplomacy is the crossover, Hugh, between technology and foreign policy to advance freedom and to stand up against authoritarianism. And we're in a unique position to do it. It's a totally unique category of Techno-Economic Statecraft, and that was the discipline really that we kind of invented when I brought the 12 Silicon Valley results-oriented execs and entrepreneurs and technologists and blend them with this tremendous diplomatic corps at the State Department. Really to combat China's economic aggression. This transformational team was responsible for the $12 billion onshoring of TSMC to advance to secure the semiconductor supply chain that now has resulted in $350 billion of U.S. investment in jobs, and also defeated the CCP's master plan for 5G. Those are a couple of their accomplishments.
Well, let's pause there for a moment. During the Trump administration, for the first time ever, under the leadership of the President, Secretary Pompeo, and you, China's technology predatory practices became very obvious to the world, especially through Huawei, through TikTok, through a number of their other initiatives. Nobody really was paying attention till your gang got to town and began to point to the CCP's omnivorous appetite to envelop and infiltrate the world's technology system. So you started the Clean Network. Would you tell people what China was up to, what the Clean Network is, and what Perdue's new Center for Diplomacy and Technology will do to advance that agenda?
Sure. So if you remember, at the beginning of 2020, it looked like China's master plan to control 5G was going to take over the world. And it's much more than smartphones. You know, this controls sanitation systems, utility grids, power systems, Internet of Things, manufacturing process. Both sides of the aisle were hitting a panic button. It looked like the CCP was going to run the table, and this is Huawei, their most important company, the backbone for the surveillance state that enables the genocide in Xinjiang. efforts had been failing because the U.S. government had been going around pounding the table saying, don't buy Huawei. We came in and we did something novel in the government. It seemed second nature to us. We said, why don't we treat these other countries and the telcos like customers? And the customer's always right. And we need a value proposition. And everything that we did was centered in trust, because what I learned was that, my first 60 bilaterals, talking to economic ministers, foreign ministers, I'd say, how important is China to you? They go, really important. And then they look both ways. They go, but we don't trust them. And that rang bells in my head, because the year before, I'm standing up in front of DocuSign going, hey, we're not in the software business. We're in the trust business. These are people's most important documents. And you think about it, trust is the ultimate thing for 5G, because we would go around the world asking country leaders and telco CEOs, who are you going to trust with your citizens' most important information? And who are you going to trust with your company's proprietary technology and the data? And by the time we were done, we had 60 like-minded countries, 200 telcos, a host of companies on that clean network, and we and Huawei's 91 5G deals dropped to a couple dozen. And what we created was an enduring strategy that's duplicatable and repeatable for all areas. Things like clean cloud, clean underwater cable, clean carrier, clean apps, clean drones, all those kind of things. And we prove that China Inc. is beatable. And in the process, we expose their biggest weakness, and that's lack of trust, Hugh.
I want to go back to something that the audience might know. Keith Krach is the founder and CEO of DocuSign. And when he says we're not in the document signing business, we're in the trust business, well, everybody who wants to succeed in the world is in the trust business. Now, our credibility took a huge hit in Afghanistan, Keith Krach. Our NATO allies no longer trust us. And it's going to be tough to get it back, because we cut and ran on them without any notice, without any SIV evacuation. You're in the trust building business. At Perdue, at the Center for Diplomacy and Technology, how do you teach the undergrads and the graduate students that they're in the trust business? Because ultimately, Americans may not even recognize this. Every day they sign a terms and agreement form, they are trusting the people on the other side of the form they haven't read not to screw them. Trust is everything, and we cannot trust the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party has shown itself to be malevolent and liars. How do you teach young people that trust is everything?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's the most important word in any language. You do business with people you trust. You buy from people you trust. You partner with people you trust. There is no business, Hugh, without trust, if you think about that. And so trust is something you do build up over time. Now, the good news is that nobody trusts the Chinese Communist Party. So we've got to do a better job. We've got to build back that trust. Now, it's one of those things. You don't have to be faster than the bear. You have to be faster than the slowest guy. And really the brilliance of the clean network strategy, if you think about it, Hugh, is that those trust principles if you add up our democratic values, things like respect for rule of law, respect for property, respect for sovereignty of nations, respect for the environment, respect for human rights, and things like transparency, accountability. These are things that the CCP has been using against us for their strategic advantage. So in other words, Hugh, if I'm competing against you and you don't have to be transparent, and you can use slave labor, and you can steal intellectual property, and you can use those coal-fired power plants, you're going to win every time. What we did is we took those trust principles, and in one jujitsu move, we flipped them on their back and used those democratic values to our strategic advantage. So in essence, what we did, Hugh, is we weaponized those very principles that protect our freedoms.
And so at Perdue, I want to close by talking about the Center for Technology and Diplomacy at Perdue. Congratulations on getting it open. Do you really think, will undergraduates go there to get the idea, or graduate students, that this is the future of the superpower struggle, which is back. Great power competition is back. All hinges on technology. We need people to know how to do this, Keith Krach. Is Perdue going to get them to come there to do that?
We do. And by the way, we've done some incredible things at Perdue. You know, first thing we did when I brought Mitch Daniels in as our president, I was the chairman of the board, is we froze tuition 10 years of gowning, right? We did University Global. We just announced a master's degree in semiconductor engineering. It's totally unique around the world. And so if you look at these good old-fashioned values, so what this model provides, this nonpartisan model provides, is a bridge, and this is what we accomplished in the last 4 years, is a bridge between a Republican administration and a Democrat administration that utilizes these transformational diplomacy by bridging that Silicon Valley playbook with foreign policy, with the best diplomatic corps in the world. So we're not only training undergraduates and master's degrees, but we're going around the world training diplomats around the world, because this is the battleground, Hugh.
And you're doing it from the good and great Midwest, so it has a chance of persuading people, because Indiana, Ohio, that's where trust is actually born. Keith Krach, good to see you again, Secretary Krach. One of the great guys of the Trump era. Keith Krach, good to see you. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. I got lots ahead today, including Tony Fauci. Got some tough questions for Tony Fauci this morning, but he always answers them. Mollie Hemingway as well, winner of the Bradley Award this year, coming along. Lots ahead on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
How many years did you have at ICE and DHS?
Just under 35.
35 years. In your service of almost 4 decades, was there any locale in America where 15,000 illegal aliens were under a bridge? That's my first question.
Absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Okay. Second question. Was there ever a case where a bus was taken over by illegal immigrants and the illegal immigrants escaped off the bus in mass numbers?
No, absolutely not.
So those two things alone surely would count as a crisis.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at Rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's a state of Texas in the United States of America. This is we're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback with reins, trying to pretend, making this effort to make you think that Border Patrol agents are slave masters, whipping the poor Haitian people who are just here looking for a better life. There needs to be an investigation about the Border Patrol agent on horseback, as if the Border Patrol agents aren't already bone-weary, overwhelmed, threatened, and in an impossible job. How'd you like to be married to a Border Patrol agent today? How'd you like to have a dad, a mom, a loved one work in that profession? With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's is what they themselves were doing.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That was Terry McAuliffe last night to Glenn Younkin. Glenn Younkin crushed the debate last night. Glenn Younkin's going to be the next governor of Virginia because parents do want to tell schools what ought to be taught and what ought not to be taught. Parents are tired of CRT. They're tired of masking preschoolers. They're tired of so much in Virginia. Glenn Younkin is a competent center-right moderate man of moderate character and very strong conservative values who represents the entire party in Virginia. He's going to win. It's going to be a rebuke of the Biden administration's collapse in Afghanistan. It's going to be a rebuke of the CRT. It's going to be a rebuke of teachers' unions. It's going to be a rebuke of Lion Terry McAuliffe. Now, Terry McAuliffe, I like him, and he likes me. Here's what Terry McAuliffe said about me a few years ago.
I'm Terry McAuliffe, and you should listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show every single day, the greatest radio show in the United States of America.
And here's what you should listen to me. Get out and vote for Glenn Younkin immediately. Early voting is open in Virginia. I voted yesterday. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt voted for Glenn Younkin yesterday. You ought to go vote for Glenn Younkin today. He won the debate going away last night. Also have to give some props to Chuck Todd last night. They had one of those moments, debate moderators here. I just moderated a debate in California for recall candidates. I'm going to moderate the Ohio Senate debate coming up. And in the middle of the debate last night, an excluded candidate stood up and started screaming. Let's play Chuck Todd, cut number 22.
Thank you. Mr. Younkin. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give this a minute.
What's your
No.
agreement? I agree.
All right. Thank you. All right. All right. All right. Security. All right. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
That's what you do. Chuck Todd is a pro. Chuck Todd is a pro. You give it a chance. You look at the audience. You give the lady a chance. She's an included candidate. She's a marginal nutter. And don't vote Libertarian. You throw your vote away. Vote for Glenn Younkin. Nutter stands up, starts screaming. Chuck tries to indulge her a little bit, looks at her, uses the hand, uses the pen, the dreaded pen point, and then finally says, security. She keeps going, then finally says, commercial break. That's a pro. Pro move, Chuck Todd. Let me check the markets. Brought to you by Birch Gold. All right, my friends at Birch Gold are the ones who are going to sell you gold when you finally wake up and see that inflation is here. Gold went up to $1,743 yesterday as the markets got crushed. The Dow was down 589 points. The NASDAQ was down 423 points. The S&P was down 90 points. The 10-year Treasury is up to 1.534. Americans are scared. They're afraid of this Chinese collapse. They're afraid we're about to print money. They don't think Pelosi can control her caucus. They're not sure she can roll the squad like she says she's going to do. Looks to me like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and the other two, Ilhan Omar and Presley, are going to get rolled by Nancy Pelosi, that they won't put their money where their mouth is and stop the infrastructure bill. Either way, the country's on shaky financial grounds, and people are turning to gold. If that's you, if you want to buy gold from the people I buy gold from, Birch Gold. You can do it by going to hughgold.com or by texting my name, Hugh, to 474747. You can either buy gold direct in Maple Leafs or Krugerrands or American Eagles, or you can in fact, roll over a portion of your IRA or 401k to a Birch Gold administered vault with your name on it. That's the good old-fashioned smart way of storing gold. Never keep it at home. And if you've got an IRA, they will keep it for you pursuant to the law. Also want to tell you that andrewandtodd.com, now is the time to buy your house. With that 10-year interest rate, the bond going up to 1.534, it was at 1.20. It was at 1.18. 4 weeks ago. It's now at 1.5. That's a 30% hike. Now, I don't know that your rate has gone up too much. I still think it's in the twos. But you can't wait around much longer. Go refi your house right now. Buy your house right now. Get requalified right now. Or get into a reverse mortgage if you're a senior by going to andrewandtodd.com or by calling 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. You can trust Andrew and Todd. As Keith Krach just said, you can trust andrewandtodd.com. Trust is everything. Trust andrewandtodd.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up with hope, which is even worse than being poor. We would have sandwiches with no meat. My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This family can pick you up every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward. Wright came in this morning. He wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was Terry McAuliffe, ex-governor of Virginia, trying to mount a comeback. He kind of hobbled onto the stage last night. Terry's not looking too good. And robust, vigorous, handsome Glenn Younkin came on there, and Terry McAuliffe actually said to the people of Virginia, play that cut for me again, please.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Let's play it one more time.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I heard that on Twitter. I was at dinner last night with friends and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, so I didn't watch the debate. But I got back into the Uber after the debate was over, and I began scrolling through it. And, of course, the phone had blown up with Terry McAuliffe telling parents that they have no business telling schools what to teach. And that brings to a head the CRT debate, the masking debate, the stay-home debate, the teachers' union debate. Glenn Younkin is winning. He won the Republican primary because right in the middle of the primary, the Virginia Education Department said, we're not going to teach AP courses anymore until you're in the 11th grade, no advanced math for students, equity issues. And Glenn Younkin said, huh? Because Glenn Younkin's a pretty smart guy. He got to school on a basketball scholarship. Poor kid. Grew up in Richmond and Virginia Beach, made good, made a lot of money, being a great businessman. Now he wants to help save Virginia. And he said, no advanced math classes? Are you out of your mind? And so Terry McAuliffe comes out last night and says, I don't think parents should be involved in designing curriculum. And every parent in Virginia looked at each other and said, I'm voting for Glenn Younkin. That's what they said last night. I'm in a great mood, not only because Glenn Younkin crushed the debate last night, but because my Moink box came yesterday. Now, if you look up M-O-I-N-K box, Moink box, it's a pretty cool name, actually. Moink is moo and oink together. It's beef and pork and bacon and lamb products. I'm not a lamb person, but the fetching Mrs. Hewitt loves lamb. And salmon and chicken, and who doesn't like chicken, but mostly it's the beef. Now, for years when I was in Southern, I'm not paid to say this, by the way. They sponsor my podcast. They don't sponsor my my radio show. But I so love the magazine they sent. It's called Moinked. That I'm sitting there going through it, and there's beef, pork, chicken, lamb, different things to order. Then it gives you the various recipes for chicken thighs and Level Up Fast and all these, peanut pork lettuce wraps and stuff like. I'm just going through this. This is almost as good as Brown's and Ohio State football stuff. And Moink Box, if you are ever going to try a direct-to-door meat product, shipping product, try Moink Box, M-O-I-N-K-B-O-X box, moinkbox.com. You're going to love it. You're going to love the name, too. You go, moo, oink. Why didn't anyone ever think of putting moo and oink together into Moink? Well, they have. Moinkbox.com. You won't forget it, and you'll be happy that you didn't forget it. If you want to know when Keith Krach has been on the show before, use the search engine widget over at HughHewitt.com. You know you've heard him before. He's the guy who founded DocuSign, right? Peter Thiel started PayPal, and Keith Krach started DocuSign, the two things that have revolutionized America. But DocuSign is the greatest thing ever invented. So Keith Krach can come on at any time that he wants. Many of you know that the biggest story yesterday was General Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin, General Milley, and General McKenzie appearing before the Senate. They're going before the House today, and I'm going to devote most of tomorrow's show to the testimony over 2 days. I'm withholding my judgment until I hear both days of testimony. I do want you to hear a little bit from yesterday. Here is General Kenneth Frank McKenzie and General Milley talking with Jim Inhofe, who was the ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, cut number 3.
But I will give you my honest opinion, and my honest opinion and view shaped my recommendation. I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. And I also recommended earlier in the fall of 2020 that we maintain 4,500 at that time. Those are my personal views. I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
Yes, I understand that. And General Milley, I assume you agree with that in terms of the recommendation of 2,500?
What I said in my opening statement and the memoranda that I wrote back in the fall of 2020 remained consistent, and I do agree with that.
This committee is unsure as to whether or not General Miller's recommendation ever got to the president. Obviously, there are conversations with the president, but I would like to ask, even though General McKenzie, I think you've all made this statement, did you talk to the president about General Miller's recommendation?
Sir, I was present when that discussion occurred, and I'm confident that the president heard all the recommendations and listened to them very thoughtfully.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't, because he pulled the plug. And he left Americans behind. Joe Biden did that. Not General McKenzie, not General Milley, not Secretary Austin. Joe Biden did that. Don't vote for Democrats. They will leave you behind. Here's an exchange between General Milley, Secretary Austin, and Senator Tom Cotton, cut number 4.
General Milley, it's your testimony that you recommended 2,500 troops approximately stay in Afghanistan?
As I've said many times before this committee and other committees, I don't share my personal recommendations to the president, but I can tell you my personal opinion and my assessment if that's what you want.
Yes, please.
Yes, my assessment was back in the fall of 20, and it remained consistent throughout, that we should keep a steady state of 2,500, and it could bounce up to 3,500, maybe something like that, in order to move toward a negotiated, gated solution.
Did you ever present that assessment personally to President Biden?
I don't discuss exactly what my conversations are with the sitting president in the Oval Office, but I can tell you what my personal opinion was, and I'm always candid.
General McKenzie, do you share that assessment?
Senator, I do share that assessment.
Did you ever present that opinion personally to President Biden?
Again, I'm not going to be able to comment on those executive discussions.
Did General Miller ever present that opinion personally to President Biden?
I think it would be best to ask him. I believe that his opinion was well heard.
Secretary Austin, President Biden last month in an interview with George Stephanopoulos said that no military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence in Afghanistan. Is that true?
Senator Cotton, I believe that, well, first of all, I know the president to be an honest and forthright man. And secondly...
It's a simple question, Secretary Austin. He said no senior military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence behind. Is that true or not? Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
Their input was received by the president and considered by the president, for sure. In terms of what they specifically recommended, Senator, as they just said, they're not going to provide what they recommended in confidence.
I mean, it sounds to me, this is shocking to me. It
Right.
sounds to me like maybe their best military advice was never presented personally to the President of the United States about such a highly consequential.
It was presented. Joe Biden disregarded it, and Joe Biden lied to you. That's the bottom line. Now, Mark Milley said a couple other things yesterday, which I'll get in quickly. Cut number 12.
Assist Turkey to maintain the Karzai International Airport and transition the U.S. military to an over-the-horizon counterterrorism support and security force assistance. It is clear, it is obvious, the war in Afghanistan did not end on the terms we wanted, with the Taliban now in power in Kabul.
He said yesterday it was a strategic loss. That's the worst thing a country can suffer. Cut number 13, more Milley.
A reconstituted al-Qaeda or ISIS with aspirations to attack the United States is a very real possibility. And those conditions, to include activity in ungoverned spaces, could present themselves in the next 12 to 36 months.
They could present themselves means they will present themselves. We are so screwed by Joe Biden. And these generals are trying to be diplomatic about it. They cannot cover the fact that the president disregarded their advice. The president pulled the plug. The president stubbornly insisted on August 30th, and Americans are still there. As of yesterday, there are still veterans on the ground in Afghanistan getting Americans out. Even if they have to go through Iran, they're going to get Americans out. They're going to get Americans. It's not the DOD. They left. It's not state. They're not picking up the phone. Maybe the agency's involved. I don't know. But this utter catastrophe is on Joe Biden. I want you to understand that. And by the way, I think it ought to impact how you vote in Virginia. If you're not already mad at McCullough for telling you you've got no business in the schools, telling the schools what to teach your students, you should listen to that. There were 3 great speeches yesterday on the Senate floor by Tim Scott, Susan Collins, and James Lankford on the dignity of work. I don't have time today. We're going to save those because I want to go back and play a little bit of Younkin. Here is Glenn Younkin talking about parents in schools. Cut number 29, please.
What we've seen over the course of the last 20 months is our school systems refusing to engage with parents. In fact, in Fairfax County this past week, we watched parents so upset because there was such sexually explicit material in the library they had never seen. It was shocking. And in fact, you vetoed the bill that would have informed parents that they were there. You believe school systems should tell children what to do. I believe parents should be in charge of their kids' education.
Mr. McCullough, 30 seconds.
Stop there. I want to go then to Glenn Younkin talking about what Virginians deserve. Cut number 30.
I'd first like to thank my wife, Suzanne, and our 4 children. You are amazing. My fellow Virginians, tonight I invite you to join me. Join me in breaking free from what has plagued our country in divided neighborhoods for too long. Broken politics, failed promises, failed leadership. You deserve better. My campaign was founded on a vision that that would confront challenges, not people, that would deliver results, not excuses. It's time to summon the spirit of Washington, of Jefferson, of Madison, and yes, Mason, by coming together to build a Virginia that we can all be proud of, a Virginia that leads. Together, we will build schools that launch our students to new heights. Together, we will build communities by reclaiming our neighborhoods from crime. Together, we will build jobs and a rip-roaring economy that will lift up all Virginians. Okay. So join me tonight with a new vision for leadership, and let's build that Virginia together.
It was a great closing statement. He is a terrific candidate. He's going to be a great governor. Play his ad very quickly. Cut 31 on Terry McAuliffe's TDS.
There's an over and under tonight on how many times you're going to say Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, 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 Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Trump, Donald Trump, 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 Donald Trump. He keeps invoking Trump.
The only person invoking Trump is you.
He's been trying to make his Republican opponent a clone of Donald Trump, but that hasn't really worked so far.
It hasn't worked. Younkin's got a great ad up. You know what works? ReliefFactor.com works. I'm holding it in my hand. I took it in the first hour. I'm going to meet with the inventor of Relief Factor today. Finally find out how he got it exactly right. It's the only supplement I take. I do take a vitamin every day. I take whatever my doctor prescribes whenever he prescribes something, so never stop taking what your doctor prescribes. But try ReliefFactor.com. Put away the over-the-counters that you use to get through the day. If you've got a aching back or bad knees, if your neck hurts from hunching over a keyboard, or you're a driver and your butt hurts, your ankle hurts, you're just in a car or a truck all day long, please try ReliefFactor.com. And if you're an active senior and you want to stay active, and at 100 you want to be running around, you want to do a 5K at 100, start taking ReliefFactor.com today at 60. Tens of thousands of people take it every morning like I do. I encourage you to please go and try it at ReliefFactor.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate, the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather. Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it. The left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the death. So you guys got me here. There's a differentiation here. There are people that are actually dying from COVID itself. Okay? Got it. And then there's people that may be dying of some other condition, but they may have tested positive for COVID. Perhaps they were even asymptomatic. Nonetheless, these people are getting registered as COVID-19 deaths when it isn't COVID that caused it. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There are some people that have some conditions, and COVID can worsen those conditions, and maybe make their demise come on more quickly. So we do have to be fair in that instance. But as health officials have failed to make those key distinction points when it comes to the government's tally of COVID deaths. This is from Brenda Brock. Brenda Brock is the coroner for COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm playing Terry McAuliffe's faceplant from last night's debate. Every single segment, because I love it so much when a Democrat says what they actually believe. Parents should have nothing to do with schools. And people in the audience say, huh? I am joined now by Brian Wesbury, principal economist for First Trust Portfolio, who will travel with me and Alfredo Ortiz, the head of the Job Creators Network, to Atlanta on October 13th. Herschel Walker will be there as well. AM920theanswer.com. If you want to get tickets, it's a ticket event. You've got to get a ticket at AM920theanswer.com for October 13th event at the Atlanta History Center. And Herschel will be there. Brian, I am curious. When Terry McAuliffe says, I don't think parents should be involved in telling schools what to teach. You're a parent. What do you think when you hear that?
Yeah, it infuriates me. I mean, and it goes right along with what the government people have said about COVID, that schools ought to be able to give a shot, a vaccine to kids without telling parents, because parents don't know what's best for their kids. I mean, it's amazing. But this is, a lot of people think, oh, we have Democrats, we have Republicans, we argue around the fringes. No, we don't. Human beings have been arguing for millennium, probably, but at least in the modern era, 250 years, 300 years, about the difference between socialism and capitalism. And socialism has to take control of the institutions of society. That would include the family. They don't take control of the church, they just get rid of the church. And so socialism is antithetical to freedom and to, what I believe the institutions God created, and family is one of those. Family has responsibility that government shouldn't have, that other institutions shouldn't have, and today socialism wants to take all those responsibilities away and give them to one entity, and that is government, or in this case, Terry McAuliffe himself.
Now, I also want to bring up, our friend Alfredo is out on a Job Creators Network bus tour, jcnbustour.com. If you want to go find Alfredo somewhere, he's going to talk about government's impact on small business. You and I are going to talk about the inflationary impact of Biden economics, which are crazy. But earlier today, I talked with Dr. Collins, who runs the NEH, about these advisory panels of people that we do not know making judgments about who should get the booster based upon international equity. Brian, the government has gotten so big that nobody knows who's running it, and people who are nameless and faceless are making decisions for Americans. This is the antithesis of free markets and free minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I like to point out, I love Twitter, and a lot of people do, but I use it to point out, complete hypocrisy or things that, people might not think about. But if we start thinking about all the credit that politicians today are trying, all of them, are trying to take for us creating jobs in this past year. And don't forget, we're still almost 10 million jobs short of where we should be. But we have added millions of jobs in the past 12 months, but it's all because we opened up. So what's funny is the government takes credit for a recovery, economic recovery from a recession it caused. And it does this in every area. And one of the first places I ever saw this was when Paul Volcker, now this goes way back to the 1980s, was the chairman of the Fed. He had Jerome Powell's job. Paul Volcker is one of the most famous Fed chairmen in history, but he had to raise interest rates to 20% to stop the inflation that the Fed created in the 1970s. And a lot of people think Paul Volcker is a hero. And when I come back and go, no, all he did was he was the head of the Fed. He fixed the problem that the Fed created. And isn't it funny? When you're in government, you can create a problem, come in, supposedly solve it, and become a hero.
Okay, we got 1 minute, Brian. Do we need to worry about this debt limit crisis? Janet Yellen, another former Fed chairman, was out preaching gloom and doom. I think the Democrats will pass the debt limit, but what do you think about this manufactured crisis?
Yeah, they will pass the debt limit increase. We don't have to worry about it right now. One of the things that there's two issues going on here. One, they have to raise the debt limit in order to keep deficit spending in the future. But the government has so many tricks up its sleeves. They can borrow from trust funds. They can do all sorts of things. That's not what's going to shut the government down. We can operate for another year without raising 9 months without raising the debt ceiling. What will be a problem is if they can't pass a budget. And if you don't have a budget, you can't spend. You can't run the government. That's what will shut the government down.
We'll talk about all this on October 13th with Herschel Walker, with Alfredo Ortiz of the Job Creators Network. Check out jcnbustour.com. Tony Fauci is next, America. Tune in to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Somehow it's convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah, for a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this, and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of green are looking at him as their boss and wait a minute. We're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
That there is a way that this could all be solved. That actually Republican states have the ability to solve this if they wanted to. Put Mayorkas aside, put the Biden bashing aside. I'm kind of tired of that, aren't you? I'm fatigued with governors going on cable television and saying, Biden regime is terrible and we need, okay, enough of that, okay? Do something about it. And in fact, Texas showed that you can do something about it. If it gets so bad, it seemed as if local government stepped up and they secured the border. They created almost a perimeter around the Haitian criminal camp of border jumpers that have tried to come into our country. Now, some people in the media are saying, well, these are refugees. No, they are not. A refugee is someone who comes from a war-torn country that is facing imminent death, or their neighborhood or their home has been bombed and obliterated to smithereens. We are, in our hemisphere, there's no such country that qualifies as a refugee country in the traditional definition. Instead, these are economic migrants. These are people that are willing to break international law, willing to break American law to try to get a higher income. We've already asked the question, how did these people get from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, from the island of Hispaniola? If you look at the geography of where Hispaniola is, it is east of Cuba. Thousands of, I don't think thousands, probably 1,800 miles all the way to the eastern shore of Mexico, then to the border. Who's paying for this?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are two things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policemen, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah. That's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America. This is not we're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic his most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store. Go to salemnow.com.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The interview with Hugh Hewitt today is with Dr. Anthony Fauci, the president's senior advisor on the virus. Good morning, Dr. Fauci. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Hugh. Always good to be with you.
Okay, this is about the half-dozen time you've been on, and I always get the same reaction. Portion of my audience loves you. Most of my audience doesn't like you, Dr. Fauci. You know that, but you come on, and I appreciate it. I would like to begin with two objective things. Kyrie Irving and other major stars in the NBA refuse to get vaccinated. They suggest there's a lot of things wrong with the vaccine. Would you speak directly to Kyrie about the damage he is doing by spreading vaccine lies?
Well, I mean, Hugh, I think you have to put it into perspective of what is going on in the country with regard to COVID-19. The now, inching close to 700,000 deaths, with a vaccine that unequivocally, from a scientific and public health standpoint, has been shown to be highly effective and safe. And although I do respect people's individual rights to make their decisions, there is also a part of it, Hugh, that is what I refer to as societal responsibility. And although there are individual choices that people can make, when you're dealing with a deadly pandemic, you've got to also understand your responsibility to the society within which you live. So I wouldn't want to be pointing a finger at this young man, but I would hope to be able to get him to understand that by allowing the virus to infect you, even though as an individual you say, I'll take my own chances, I don't care, I'm young, I'm healthy, the likelihood that I'm going to get a serious disease is low, which is true. You can't deny that. But what happens is that when you do get infected, it's very well likely that you might pass that infection on to someone who would suffer very terribly from that virus. So you don't want to be a vehicle for the propagation of an outbreak that unequivocally has devastated society. That's what I would appeal to. His feeling.
But Doctor, he does more than that. Kyrie and some other NBA stars put stuff online that suggests that the vaccine is dangerous, that it could hurt you. So you need to speak to them directly. It's not pleasant. What do you say to basketball stars?
Well, you tell them that it's untrue. I mean, the fact is, these are people, they're not stupid people. And yet they are somehow or other been convinced of things that are just not factual, Hugh. I mean, you look at the data. The data are overwhelming that these are highly effective and safe. And if you look at the track record of vaccines in general, what they've done for society and the benefit risk ratio overwhelmingly weighs in favor of the benefit. And it's just factual. I mean, sometimes it's inexplicable that people can look at data and just say it doesn't exist. I mean, it does.
Okay, it's just factual. I'll come back to that in a second. I want to go to the panel. I got my booster on Friday. My wife and I, first day of eligibility, first day it was cleared. We're Pfizer people. We were on the wrong side of 65 when the vaccine came out. We were on the right side of 65 when the vaccine's booster came out. So we were first in line. We got it. We're happy. No side effects. Got the flu shot. All good. I want to go back to the FDA panel and the CDC panel. And I'm sure you participated in both, their recommendation. I disagree with the recommendation. I think the booster should be available to any American who wants it, because this is a free country. Equity issues entered into that conversation. We had advisory panel members bring their own politics to the table about international equity issues. Did you or anybody say to them, that's not your job? Your job is to make a scientific discussion about the booster, not tell us about international equity.
Well, Hugh, I didn't take part in addressing or discussing with those advisory groups because that would not be appropriate. But what I have done publicly in multiple forums and telling you now to confirm how I feel, I agree with you on this. This should have been a scientifically based decision, not a decision that is in some respects influenced by other policy type decisions. The United States of America has done more and is committed to be doing even more to get doses of vaccine to low and middle income countries. We have done more than all of the rest of the world combined. So my approach would be just as you said. That is an important issue. Global equity. We are addressing that. The rest of the world of rich countries should also be addressing that. But that needs to be put aside when you talk about what's the scientific basis for recommendations regarding booster doses for those of us here in this country. And it's no secret how I feel. I feel a bit differently from what that recommendation is. The recommendation had a strong dichotomy. It seems like they were saying it is okay as long as you don't wind up in the hospital and die. So if the vaccine efficacy wanes for infection, mild and moderate disease, that's okay. You don't really need a booster now, as long as the vaccine efficacy for hospitalization prevention doesn't wane. I don't feel that way. I feel we need to protect not only from getting people in the hospital, that's very, very important, but we don't want people to get sick, because if you get COVID, yes, you could get asymptomatic and you could get mild disease. However, you can also get pretty sick and not necessarily have to go to the hospital. So for that, in many respects, I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Well, I hear that. And doctor, there's a bigger issue. The government has a job to do, a constitutional order. It's represented by elected people, and the president is elected. Advisory committees are not only not elected, they're appointed by bureaucracies. If they're imposing their policy preferences on the American people who are our free people, something is badly broken at the FDA and the CDC, and they need to be called out and rebuked. That is not their job. Do you agree with me?
No, I don't, Hugh. So I gave you how I feel individually as a physician, a scientist, and a public health person. But the process of looking at the data and getting the data as it exists now to drive a recommendation is a sound process. They don't always get it right, but they do it in a way that's a process that's a sound process. I believe, and I've said this publicly, that CDC Director Rochelle Walensky did a good thing and a courageous thing by not completely accepting the recommendation of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. I thought that was a good thing, and I thoroughly agreed with that. The thing that got the confusion is saying what do we know right now about the data versus what I personally, and this is not me as a committee member, but personally would have done is say, we need to stay ahead of the virus. So if you look at what's happening, for example, in Israel, and what is the suggestion of what's happening now, I would have leaned much more towards a broader allowance of boosters for people as opposed to what was ultimately decided.
Doctor, your specialty is medicine and public health. Mine is constitutional law. I've taught it and practiced it for 25 years. And what they are doing is going outside of their lane when they inject the equity discussion into a scientific discussion. That leads me to my next question. This is difficult for me, but I want to run down for your benefit. The controversy since the virus started include the botched testing at the beginning, no research on masks for children in primary care, the J&J pause, the controversy over the use or non-use of ivermectin, and there was no study yet completed. Dr. Collins told me it's not done yet. The no discussion of natural immunity, which exists and ought to be out there. The discussion of herd immunity, which is switched back and forth. The mask discussion at the beginning, don't wear masks, the noble lie, and then wear masks. Now, equity issues in the FDA panel scientific discussion. I've lost confidence in the CDC and the FDA. And I actually believe a lot of Americans, a significant part of America, now have lost confidence in you, Dr. Fauci. Is there a point where you will say, I do more harm than good because people don't listen to me anymore, and step aside?
No, absolutely unequivocally no, Hugh. Sorry. I mean, I agree with a lot of the things that you've been saying. You come from a different perspective than I do. But I think the thing that gets lost in the discussion and that people need to understand, and I do know that some people don't understand it and don't accept it, even if they, smart people who evaluate it in their own context, is that we have been dealing with an evolving situation. And I just get back to what I've said before, and I totally understand and respect your differences, Hugh, that when you have an evolving situation and data are rapidly evolving in something that's unprecedented and unknown, you have to evolve with it and look at the data as it exists now and make, to the best of your ability, a decision, a recommendation, all the kinds of things that go into the evolution. And things have changed. We didn't know things early on. I always get asked the question, it's a very common question, what would you have done back then if you knew what you know now? The question answers itself. If I knew then what I know now, the circumstances would have been different. So if this were a completely static situation, Hugh, and people change their mind and change their recommendations and things, you could say, my goodness, they're flip-flopping, what's going on? But it's been an evolving situation. From day one, we had no idea that a virus that could actually kill so many people would be completely asymptomatic in about 50 to 60% of people, and that many of the infections, almost half, were transmitted by people who had no symptoms. That's where the mask situation got all muddled. You know that. I mean, I'm telling you something you know. And I could understand when people are looking for definitive answers in an evolving situation. It doesn't work that way, Hugh. It just
does.
No,
there's a large and a small part, Doctor. The large part is not, I'll come back to the small part on the masks. I'm told by people in the room that you knew there were a shortage of masks, so you told people not to wear masks so that we didn't have a run on masks. I actually understand that as public policy. I've read the account. I've talked to the people in the room. I know that you purposely told the noble lie to prevent us running out of masks in hospitals. I think it's bad policy, but I understand the motive. And I understand changing. I change my mind every day. You know, I'm on the air every day. Stuff happens. I change my mind. But what you said earlier, it's just facts sometimes. It's just a fact that Tony Fauci, not the guy I'm talking with, but Tony Fauci, the person in people's mind, is now an impediment to public health because people won't listen to you. They actively reject what Tony Fauci says for reasons which are complicated, have to do with psychology, mass communication, social media. But can you accept that if that's just a fact, you ought to respond to it and say, Mr. President, I think my time is up as a successful and effective spokesperson?
You know, with all due respect to you, Hugh, who I do respect you and your intellect, I just completely disagree with that premise, because there are an awful lot of people who do listen, who do the right thing from a public health standpoint. So because there are a lot of people who have ideas about conspiracies and changing minds and flip-flopping, that's not a reason to step down, not at all. When I was involved 40 years ago with HIV, and the activist community were looking at me as a representative of the face of the federal government, and were trying to get things done. And it looked like we were at odds in the sense of really essentially being hostile to each other, which we weren't. That would have been interpreted as, gee, the people who were involved in this particular difficult and devastating outbreak don't like what you're doing. Why don't you step down? As a matter of fact, as it turned out, we got close. They understood. I brought them into the dialogue, into the discussion. And the world and the community were much better off with that. So the idea that people right now are not listening to what I'm saying is the truth. It is
Dr. Fauci, I actually agree. I got the booster. I'm Mr. Vaccine. I get the same kind of heat you do. And so what I'm saying, though, is there comes a point where it is simply a matter of fact that Tony Fauci in the era of social media is different than Tony Fauci at the beginning of HIV. And if a new face for the program developed, we would see an increase in vaccines and an increase in booster use. So if that data is presented to you, that more people would get vaccinated if you left the scene, would you leave the scene?
Hugh, I think that is a completely false narrative that people are not getting vaccinated because of me. I am very sorry. I've told you, I've known you a long time and I respect you, but I totally reject that people are not getting vaccinated because of me. Are you kidding me, Hugh? Come on.
I'm trying to explain to you the truth. I got vaccinated because of you, but there is a large segment of the American people that doesn't trust you now, and that can't be undone. So I want you to be able to just speak to them. I know your heart, I know your public service, but if you're an obstacle to getting vaccination rates up, should you step aside?
I am not an obstacle to getting vaccinations up, Hugh. That is a completely false narrative that I would have to absolutely reject.
Okay. Then if are you persuadable on facts? If people show you polling, would that change your mind?
Yeah, so people are saying I'm not getting vaccinated because Dr. Fauci is in the government. Are you kidding me?
No, actually, I believe that's the truth, Doctor. I believe given... Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Hugh. That is ridiculous.
How do you think you're understood by the center-right, Doctor? I really don't know that you know this. You might have a blind side here. How do you think you're understood? Not by conspiracy theorists. I'm not concerned with the 3%. I'm concerned with the 59%.
Yeah, but Hugh, you are creating an absolutely false narrative that people sit down and say, I know that vaccines are good. I know that they may save my life and that they may save the life of my family, and that I have a societal responsibility in order to keep this outbreak under control and to get it really under control. But I'm just not going to get vaccinated because of Tony Fauci. Hugh,
you're not hearing me.
No way.
You're not hearing me, Doctor. You're not hearing me. I'm saying people see you come on and they turn off the channel because they don't like you. Whereas if a new face arrives, a new younger face that says, okay, new start, I'm never going to tell you that masks don't need to be warned because if a new person shows up, I think we're more effective. Last response to you, Doctor.
Okay, so you have Rochelle Walensky, a new young face, saying exactly the same thing. You have Vivek Murthy, a new young face, saying exactly the same thing. So even though they are new young faces and saying exactly the same thing I'm saying, people are not getting vaccinated because of me? Hugh, sorry, you go back and analyze that. That's crazy.
I will. We'll have that conversation. And
Okay.
I appreciate, as always, your coming. You know how much I respect you, but I think the facts are on my side on this. By the way, tell Dr. Walensky to please do this show like you and Dr. Collins. I would love to talk to her and persuade people to get vaccinated.
Very good. I will do that, Hugh. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, Doctor. So Dr. Fauci and I disagree. I try and be polite when I say it. I try and be polite when I talk about the advisory panels, but that was the last step. When the advisory panel said equity issues are involved, that's not their job. And so when I look through my long list of everything that's happened at the CDC and the FDA, they have blown, I got to get my list out. They have blown so many things. And I believe in the vaccine, and hear me out. You should get vaccinated. Please, Kyrie Irving, get vaccinated. Please, everybody get a booster. Please don't put yourself in harm's way. But do me the favor, people at the CDC and the FDA, understand that the credibility crisis you have is of your own making. You botched the J&J. You botched it, not me. You botched the FDA rollout. You botched the mask, not me. You botched the herd immunity, not me. I think we need a new team. If you need a team for a home loan, this show is sponsored by AndrewandTodd.com, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, AndrewandTodd.com. I need you to go and get your home loan from them. I trust them in a way that I used to trust the FDA and the CDC, but I still trust Andrew and Todd. 888-1172. 888-1172. Don't let this day go by without getting pre-qualified. You'll never be able to buy a house in this market unless you are. Get that pre-qualification from AndrewandTodd.com. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I saw the pictures. They were just grabbing them with their hands, and the reins are used to turn the horses. I was like, what? But this is what the left does. They fool people. Like if you're, okay, so I'm like, okay. If I'm on that border is being overwhelmed. I'm going a little crazy, okay? I'm going a little crazy. So maybe they got a little crazy, but maybe, you know what I mean? If we were in that situation, but no, come to find out, it was just another left-wing attack, another left-wing fiasco made to look like you heard Ilhan Omar saying that our country is systemically racist. Meanwhile, her black behind is on TV. Her black behind is in Congress, shaping our nation into an anti-Semitic country, but we're systemically racist. Meanwhile, this bigot is in Congress, shaping our nation and turning our nation into a bunch of racists. I kid you not. I feel like every day I come into this studio, I feel like I'm checking the corner. Where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I feel like I'm being punked by the Democrats every day. Out there. Let's go to Joel in San Diego, California.
Yeah, man, 1996. Everyone forgets 900 FBI files were found in the Clinton White House.
Good point.
And they've been in the pocket of the FBI for years.
Joel,
so this thing goes deep. We need a new untouchables to be reincarnated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I feel dumb asking this question. Is there any way to vet 120,000 Afghan quote-unquote refugees if they don't have any ID papers, Tom?
No. And let me tell you something. Let's just look at the facts. It takes, especially an immigrant visa, takes 18 to 24 months to vet.
Yeah.
Right? Because CIS gets it, they send it to the chief of mission at the embassy. He has it for, at least 12, 13 months, and they go through all the Afghan records, right? Is a birth certificate legitimate? Is a passport legitimate? They got to go through all these certain documents and check numerous databases, including DOD databases. Is there any derogatory information on this person? Before this happened in Afghanistan, the regular process took 18 and 24 months. And here's the fact. 84% of SI visa requests were denied.
Wow.
And that's when they had time to actually vet them. So now they're trying to vet within days or weeks when they got no access. There is no chief of mission. There is no embassy over there. I don't know where the operator is. Do they have access to Afghan records anymore? Does the Taliban have it? How do they know what's a legitimate passport? Where do all the records for the Afghan government go? So we got no staff over there, no insight over there. We don't have access to Afghan paperwork. And I talked to people here at Dulles, law enforcement, that said some of these people show up as absolutely zero ID. How the hell can you possibly vet them? If you got an 84% denial rate when they have time, that tells you how full of fraud this whole system is.
So the idea that we are still safe, that this isn't being exploited by terrorists, that's just garbage, right, Tom?
We are scary unsafe.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
The front page of the New York Times, the alleged paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what the New York Times is covering today. The paper of record. They're also covering Biden's speech at the United Nations, which we will cover a little bit. There's not that much there to cover, as he read from a teleprompter. Instead, we're going to cover the imminent invasion happening in our country. We already have had 1.8 million people illegally cross into our country this year. 1.8 million. Cutting in line, border jumping, breaking the law. These are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals. This is designed disorder. It's up and does something. There's nothing we can do.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
That's Terry McAuliffe at the debate last night telling all of Virginians that parents should not be involved in telling schools what they should be teaching. I'm joined by Mollie Hemingway. I used to always say that Mollie was on the Fox News with Brett Baer every evening, that she was the founder of the Federalist. Now I'm just going to call her the Bradley Prize recipient, because to me that's more important than everything else. It's the recognition that in the public square we have some heroes, and Mollie is one of them. I saw Mollie at John Androzik's concert on Sunday night. Hello, Mollie. It's been 2 days. Good to see you again on the radio.
It's great to see you. Wasn't that a great show?
It was, and it was the most somber of the shows. I've seen him 6 or 7 times. Truly, the Afghanistan fiasco weighs on his heart heavily. Did you notice that?
I thought it was so powerful to end the show that way, and I think he speaks to what so many people are feeling about the dishonorable manner in which we left that whole situation, if not how we handled much of our time there. And I think our political leaders don't understand how much that weighs on each of us.
I believe we're all complicit, and we've got to do things about it. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to General Miley and General Austin and General McKenzie yesterday. But I want to start, Mollie, with the uncomfortable conversation I just had with Dr. Fauci. Now, I like Tony Fauci. I've admired him for a long time, but I just had the Dad, I've got to take the keys away conversation with him because I believe he's an obstacle to public health now. And after a year and a half of screw up after screw up, the testing fiasco, the J&J fiasco, no tests on ivermectin, no research on masks on children, the most recent injection of equity into the booster discussion. I actually think it's an objective matter of fact that he's an obstacle to people getting the vaccine. Do you agree with me?
There are a lot of problems with how we've handled the communication of the public health situation that we're in, but I actually have had a problem with him. I agree with you. You know, I have heard so many good things about him. I know people who speak highly of him, but when he first admitted that he was saying things that were not true in order to have a certain outcome, I actually thought that was such a major problem. Public health is about trust. It's about saying things that cut against, your own argument sometimes if the facts lead you in a different way. And so for me, I was there a long time before you were.
Okay, so I've gotten there. And I also began the interview with the very basic question. Kyrie Irving and a bunch of famous NBA players won't get vaccinated. Would you speak to them directly? And he didn't, because that's politically incorrect to do. That tells me, what's that tell you, Mollie, before I tell you what I think? What's that tell you?
I don't know. That seems kind of political that he wouldn't, given that he's been willing to talk to so many other people. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think he went around in a circle and he got as close as he could, but that he's very sensitive to Beltway mores. And I actually think the whole FDA, CDC, public health bureaucracy, to a degree I never imagined, has been captured by Beltway gas, that they breathe the air and it impacts them. And you know what I mean by Beltway gas.
I do. And, Hugh, there's also the issue of just the questions surrounding precisely how some of these bureaucrats, including Fauci, have handled the questions about the lab in Wuhan, what our relationship has been through pass-through funding. I mean, these are very important issues to be completely transparent and open and honest about. And we don't have that. And we oddly don't have enough pressure on people to get to the bottom of some of these issues about precisely how the entire world is suffering from this global pandemic and what could have been done differently to avoid it.
Yeah, and I just think the doctor was extremely defensive this morning. We'll see what other people think about it. But let me go to the sub-issue there. The FDA and the CDC have advisory panels. They're supposed to pass on the science, Mollie. Dr. Collins and Dr. Fauci admitted to me today they took into their deliberations questions of equity, whether or not the United States was getting too much booster shots before the third world. Do the scientific advisory panels, in your view, have any role to play in the setting of international policy by the United States?
First of all, I actually think that one of the problems we've had is pretending that science is some authority that can exist outside of other considerations, or that just because someone's an expert on epidemiology, that therefore they're an expert in all public health or in all of the consequences of various decisions. But this seems different, which is bureaucrats who serve one government, and the citizens and people who are served by that government making decisions on behalf of other people. That is definitely outside well beyond their pay grade or their area of authority, which is not to say that you shouldn't think about how something affects people in other countries, affects your overall health, but there is something that's about your national interest that must be predominant. And just in general, some of these issues of equity have been just downright, it's kind of a Trojan horse term that brings in all sorts of bad ideas. And I just saw that there was a complaint against New Hampshire for denying a vaccine to someone solely on the basis of race because they had determined something about equity, at just a state level. So a lot of these things are fraught, and they need to be, there needs to be much more scrutiny.
Incredibly, the administrative state has grown so large, and I know you talk about this when you teach at Hillsdale, that it is suffocating the idea that Americans are a free people and we make decisions for ourselves. Mollie, before I go to the Afghanistan fiasco and the testimony yesterday, I want to ask you about the Bradley Award. People don't know what a big deal that is. That is a huge deal. What did you talk about the night that you accepted the award?
It was such a great thing to receive, and I like to think that I don't need any, outside notice, but it was so wonderful to receive an award that now I've totally changed my mind, and I now think awards are great. But they also gave us a chance to just give a few minutes of remarks on whatever we wanted to. And so I took the opportunity to talk about the importance of courage, particularly in the conservative movement, which I think has a ton of people, has wonderful ideas, and has had wonderful ideas for a long time, but has a deficit of courage in our leadership, particularly with people, this is not just political leaders, but media figures who have too often been willing to accept defeat or negotiate terms of surrender, have allowed progressivism to march through all of our institutions, and how we really need to fight harder on behalf of the Republic and these ideas.
Bravo. Just yesterday, there was an announcement by Dave Wasserman, who writes Redistrict, that the Republicans are playing defense in their redistricting and the Democrats are playing offense. So that Democrats in states like New York and Illinois are killing off every Republican district they can. And Republicans in states like Texas and, let me think, that Florida's the outlier. In a couple of other states where they control everything, they're being defensive, just trying to keep what they have and leave the Democrats alone. I think that goes back to Newt Gingrich versus Bob, whatever his name was, Michael, that the combative Republican is the Republican that conservatives want. They don't want the go along to get along conservative. Agree with me?
Well, the central question in politics is who rules, and for some reason, a lot of people on the right think that's an icky question, or that they're uncomfortable with what to do with any power that they have, and they do a disservice to their followers, and people are more than fed up with that.
And by more than fed up with that, does it change voting patterns? Will, for example, Glenn Younkin win in Virginia because people have now seen for a year what it means to have unified Democratic rule in D.C.?
I'm not sure about that. I live in Virginia, and Virginia is a pretty blue state. It voted by 10 points for Joe Biden, so it's a huge lift. But I don't think there's been such a good chance for Republicans as Glenn Younkin winning a statewide race in a while here. And a lot of that has to do with the failure of Democrats on the national level, or the Democratic candidate last night, for some reason, going on stage and saying that parents shouldn't be talking to schools about what to teach their children, which I don't know if there's any issue that animates Northern Virginians of all stripes right now so much as their dissatisfaction with what schools are doing in curriculum and other issues.
Let me replay that. If anyone's just joining us, last night Glenn Younkin, Republican, debated Terry McAuliffe, Democrat, and schools came up repeatedly. At one point, Terry McAuliffe said this:
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools
what they teach. Mollie, it was a moment. It's a gaffe is when you say what you believe and you shouldn't, according to Michael Kinsley. That's true. That's what Terry McAuliffe believes. How do you react to that as a parent?
Well, first off, that's exactly right, that this is kind of the issue of our day, is whether we have government of, by, and for the people, or whether we have this unaccountable administrative state that has two tiers of justice, two tiers of standards. I mean, it's really the issue at the national level, and I'm kind of glad we can talk about it at the state level as well. But I live in a very blue neighborhood, and I talk with other parents in our neighborhood. They are so upset with their schools right now, even as they feel kind of trapped and that there are no other options. I just cannot imagine that Glenn Younkin is going to do anything other than play that on loop on TV and YouTube ads from here till the election, because that is a great argument for Glenn Younkin over Terry McAuliffe. And it also just speaks to how, I think Terry McAuliffe is having trouble as a Democratic candidate in a Democratic state because he is so tied with that, the halls of power, the distance, he's kind of a meh candidate for a lot of Democrats anyway, and that cannot have helped.
Now, I have a belief in things called Chick-fil-A issues, Mollie Hemingway. Those are issues that go back to the day then Chick-fil-A was being canceled. I think they were the first big cancel because they were in favor of traditional marriage between one woman and one man. And so on a designated day that got no attention in the media, millions of people went to Chick-fil-A and bought sandwiches. The lines were around the block. Even though there was no media coverage, no one announced it. It just traveled by word of mouth. I believe CRT is a Chick-fil-A issue, that CRT is actually in every house being discussed quietly. People don't want to discuss it out in the air, and, they don't want to get canceled. They don't want to get yelled at. But I think it's revolutionizing America. Do you agree or disagree with what is going on around kitchen tables?
Oh, that's not even close. And it's also just going across normal political divisions. Nobody likes racism taught in their schools. And that's what CRT is. It's teaching kids to be race-obsessed, to have dislike of other people based on their race, to have self-hatred based on race, to teach little black girls that they're a victim who can never accomplish anything. No black parent wants that for their child. So it's something that cuts across racial lines, political divisions, socioeconomic divisions. And so it's wonderful that people who discovered this racism that was being taught to their poor children, that they're elevating this issue and highlighting it so parents can fight back, contrary to what Terry McAuliffe says about them having no say in what their children learn, complete confusion about what the role of education is and how it exists on behalf of the parents' educating authority. But it's important. It's a political gift to people who oppose it that this ham-fisted, awful racism is being taught. But it's also just important that we as a people who want to live together in peace and harmony with each other reject this and all other forms of racism that can do so much to tear down the bonds that we have together.
Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "The way to end racism is to stop using race." And he's absolutely right. And I think that's why we're going to be very happy with the decisions from the new court, the 6-3 court, on race and on religious liberty. Mollie, before I turn to Afghanistan, will you tell people how big the Federalist is now? This is actually, like Prager University is to Dennis, the Federalist is to you. You're accomplished in your own right. You're doing so much in your own right, but you've begun something that is actually changing the culture in the Federalist.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, we started the Federalist, our online magazine, 8 years ago. Just a couple weeks ago, we celebrated our 8th birthday, and we are so pleased with what we have done. We have millions of readers and just great stuff on. It's very much like a common sense approach to all the issues of politics and culture, which we thought was missing from a lot of media, whether it was left-wing media or right-wing media, just a place where people from throughout the country can you can highlight arguments that we're not having sway in D.C. And I think what we've seen in the last 8 years is this great pushback on the calcified, stultish situation that was happening in D.C. with people saying, we've had enough. We finally want government accountable to us. We want good ideas. And I'm just thrilled that we've been able to play such a big part in that.
Well, its organic growth and its exponential growth is because legacy media has not changed fast enough. And because legacy media is often accused by the left of doing both sidesism, they actually don't do that. They don't give our side much oxygen at all, if any. And they usually handicap us when we do talk. The Federalist has taken over. That brings me to the Presidential Debate Commission, which is, I'm like Cato the Elder when it comes to Carthage, and the Presidential Debate Commission must be destroyed. Mollie, do you think you could run a presidential debate fairly?
I'm not sure if that's my particular skill set, but I cannot believe I've been frustrated with the Presidential Debate Commission for a long time. Last year was an absolute debacle. I mean, they didn't even host a presidential debate until like a month after people started voting. That's unacceptable. And when they actually received a request to have an event, to have a debate earlier, once we radically changed all our voting laws to enable much quicker voting, they declined that. They were supposed to have a foreign policy debate. They just decided not to do it because they didn't like President Trump. Bob Dole, I don't know if you remember what he said last year. He said, I know and like all the Republicans on the Presidential Debate Commission, and I can tell you they all hate Donald Trump.
Yes.
And he's like, that's no way to run things. But it's been bad for a long time. You've had moderators getting involved. I think the bigger problem is we, for some reason, allow media figures to moderate debates, even though they've become so highly partisan. And there's a time when the media were just biased and people were complaining about that going back to Eisenhower. But like in the last 5 years, they've gone into outright propaganda and censorship. They kill stories they don't agree with. They invent stories that are fake. They're actively working on behalf of one political party. They have no role in debate. They should have no role in debate. They're not moderate. They can't moderate.
If they had a debate panel of Mollie Hemingway and Rachel Maddow and Don Lemon and Hugh Hewitt, that would be a fair and interesting debate panel, 4 partisans, 2 of them from the left and avowedly so, and 2 of them from the center right and avowedly so. And we would ask questions from our wheelhouse representing those people who follow us either on the air, who read you, etc. The debate commission will never get there. They are older than, look, I'm old. They're older than dirt. We're going to find their fossils pretty soon, and the debate commission has got to go. Now let's get to Afghanistan. Mollie, what happened there? How do you understand the tragedy of Afghanistan after 20 years, the Taliban hanging people by cranes, American citizens abandoned, green card holders by the thousands there, hundreds of thousands of Afghans who worked for us, including the interpreters, abandoned to the Taliban justice? How did America lose uniquely and so shamefully in Afghanistan?
Well, one thing I think both sides of this argument have failed to address not sufficiently is how so much of the problems that we faced in the last year had something to do with how we had been waging our operation there for a long time. Going into Afghanistan was noble. Our efforts initially were great. We had massive success. As we changed into a nation-building exercise, we never quite understood Afghanistan at the level we should. We saw that in how we all claim we were surprised, although I don't think anybody should have been surprised at how quickly everything fell. And it was an opportunity for people to be in a region, have very low accountability. I don't know if you ever read those CGAR Inspector General reports about what was happening in Afghanistan, but just massive amounts of corruption and fraud and waste and abuse to the tune of 30% of our taxpayer dollars that were there. And then as it kept going and nobody wanted to deal with the reality that, we pushed everybody into Pakistan, but then we didn't want to deal with the reality that Pakistan was harboring these people, we just kind of kept an operation going at such a high expense level in terms of body count and money. And then finally, when we exit, there is some truth to the argument it was going to be messy no matter what happened. That does not in any way excuse the absolutely ridiculous strategy that was put into play for how to handle the departure. People had come to agreement, largely in a bipartisan fashion, about the need to reorient toward a different threat. The idea that we would leave in the manner we did is absurd. And what struck me about yesterday is those were people who knew they were never going to be held accountable for mismanaging this process. They didn't even seem to have a slight worry about it. And they shouldn't, because we no longer hold people accountable for massive failure, including the deaths of 13 soldiers and service members because of how we botched this. But there is a lot of fatherhood to that failure, and it's not just those 3 men that we saw testifying yesterday.
Well, it is primarily, and this is where I want to end, Joe Biden. I do not believe Donald Trump, because of his sensitivity to media, if for no other reason, would have allowed a catastrophe to befall Afghanistan. He would not have left Americans behind. He obsessed over getting every American home. He brought home 50 Americans over the course of 4 years from places as remote as North Korea and Yemen. He never gave up. He would never have left America. That would not have happened. Whether people hate him or love him, that wouldn't have happened. But put Donald Trump aside and talk to me about Joe Biden, because Ross Douthat raised in the New York Times something I raised in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago, and that is, I believe the president is infirm. That doesn't mean he has dementia. That doesn't mean he has Alzheimer's. It just means he's old. And as Harvey Mansfield said on this program last week, when you get old, you lose energy, and you try and conserve energy for those things which matter the most to you, and you simply turn away from that which doesn't. It's a part of aging. He simply closed the door on Afghanistan. He didn't want to bother with it. That's my assumption. Do you think he's infirm and simply closing the book on stuff he doesn't have the energy to deal with?
I think politically he felt boxed in on Afghanistan. He may not have agreed with Trump's decision to leave, but he knew that the public would not support him staying, and so he was kind of just stubborn about it. But clearly something is going on there. I mean, I know that you probably experience this too, Hugh. Like, one of the conversations that people have regularly is just wondering who's running things in the Biden White House. In other words, people just kind of accept the assumption that it's not Joe Biden, so who is it? And you see it in just the lack of energy, as you said. I pray I'm doing as well as Joe Biden is when I'm his age, but a lot of my friends who are his age say that there are declines that happen there, and that and fatigue and mental acuity and all these things are just like natural part of aging. But I worry about it. I mean, sometimes at night when he's giving speeches or otherwise, it doesn't seem like he's fully in control. I want him to give speeches during the day for the sake of our foreign adversaries seeing him at his best. But yeah, it seems to be something. But I really don't know what's going on there, and I'm a little concerned about how we aren't allowed to really have the types of conversations we need to be having about whether he has the support he needs. And you look at the comparison with the absolutely hysterical coverage of his predecessor and the constant speculation about his health. And whatever you want to say about the two men, there's no question that Donald Trump has a lot more energy than Joe Biden does, and that he's able to handle much more questioning from the press, answering questions regularly from them. We're not seeing that now, but you're not allowed to talk about it too much.
You know, Mollie, President Trump was ignorant of many things. And ignorant doesn't mean stupid. It just means he never crossed them. It's like I had a conversation with Jesse McCarthy last week, a professor at Harvard of African American Studies, and I'm ignorant of the novels of Toni Morrison, and I confess to that. I just haven't read Toni Morrison. He was aghast, so I'll read some Toni Morrison. Being ignorant isn't being incapacitated. I worry about infirmity and our adversaries, and they are many, wondering whether now is the time to press an advantage against the United States. Do you worry about what the CCP will do vis-a-vis Taiwan after the Olympics?
I mean, I worry about the situation. I worry in general about China's seeming interest in pressing some issues with their adversaries. I'm also worried about us getting into a hot war with China. I mean, I think it's best if we handle things through economic opposition and encouragement and pressuring campaigns. We do not want to get in a hot war, and we have to be careful in how we talk about what our red lines are and what we're willing to do. But it's clear that we also just need to be focused in the region and focused on building up our allies in the region.
Last question, Mollie. You're way too young to remember 1979 the way that I do. It was the nadir. There are Cubans all over Africa, the Iranian Revolution, the Russians in Afghanistan, Jimmy Carter as president. Along comes Reagan. Do you think we get another Reagan, or does President Trump present an insurmountable obstacle to a normal succession? Where do you see the GOP and the conservative movement within it going forward?
Oh, I think it's like such a fascinating thing right now to think about this. President Trump, obviously the establishment GOP doesn't like him, but they're doing everything wrong to make it so that he will not go away for another, 7 years. And I think he would be happy not to run again if he felt that the party was taking all the good that he did and running with it, taking his policy ideas and showing some fight. And instead, the Republican Party seems to not be learning how to win elections, the good that Donald Trump taught them. And so I feel like they're getting everything back to a situation where he might feel compelled to run again, which is the one thing that they don't want. But they're not presenting an alternative to their voters that would take away the shininess of a potential Trump run again. So it's an interesting time. There are, though, I think a lot of really good people out there who voters are testing the waters with, and so we'll see. And I mean, obviously, Ron DeSantis would be chief among them, and seems to have the policy chops, the courage to take on the corrupt media, and a lot of what people like in Trump, including that he seems to annoy all the right people.
Yeah, combativeness is key, and I think DeSantis, Cotton, Pompeo, Tim Scott, Chris Christie, you've got to be combative, the way the Federalist is. To win, you got to play to win, not to get people angry. You got to play to win. Mollie, you play to win. The Federalist is winning. I appreciate your taking time with me today. Congratulations again on the Bradley Award. That's a big deal. and on the growth of the Federalist. Come back soon.
Thank you, Hugh.